Good afternoon. I'd like to see if you can help me with my PowerPoint. Thank you for being here and for giving me the space. I work at the University of Costa Rica and in two subcommissions of the National Council of Rectors in Costa Rica. And today I'm wearing two hats. And I think this presentation goes along these lines from the two hats and focusing on the hat of user of the systems of a repository for assessment of research. We have my presentation ready. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. Apart from having a concrete offer, this presentation brings up a lot of questions we ask when using repositories and that we think about using them to do research assessment. So beyond making use of solutions or actual uses of the repositories in research management, there's questions that have to be here to help us build them with the table. First of all, I'm going to go through very quickly. I don't want to take long. In the history of repositories in Costa Rica, there's a previous history before its consolidation that has to do with the dynamics of the discourse of the hard copy document as an official document, and then the digitalization of the digital. So we have discussions before the existence of repositories, and we have a period of when repositories exist in our universities. So we divide this in four major periods. We're going to be looking at some dates. We're 5 state-owned universities with different levels of creations. Were created at different times, and most likely these dates coincide with most, but not with all. But the 4 moments, yes. First, period of creation and resistance, when we consolidate the initiatives that promote the creation of repositories with infrastructure that allow the collection of university production using self-deposit strategies, so that researchers were the ones populating beyond mandatory policies, and always with resistance because of lack of knowledge that there are open access movements and lack of knowledge of the use and positive impact on the scientific community in the country. Then we have a period of recognition that happens from the same institutions that say these are the institutional repositories and we believe in them. And so an activation campaigns, endowment of resources and formalization of these spaces. And then we have a period of relationship and growth. And in the case of Costa Rica, this is where we came together as universities with initiatives from these repositories and worked for the construction of a major national repository that would be stronger as a whole, but also strategies of our information systems, projects, and even relating them with systems assessing researchers. And a strategy that was used to motivate the use from authorities was data endowment. Our repositories have data that we begin to offer to authorities so that they validate these spaces. This helped us to consolidate, which is the period we're in. It doesn't mean all of the spaces are 100% consolidated, but there's a certain stability by the Ministry of Science and Technology. They've recognized the National Repository of Costa Rica as a space of academic production, scholarly production. And this led to a need and use of authorities from these repositories. And this is where we have the two objectives that come from our repositories. One, that is open access to knowledge in line with visibilizing scholarly production as a critical input for scientific and technological development in the country, and then an objective that within our universities in the country at large begin to look at the possibility of using the resources and repositories there to assess contributions to research results, and not only to make them visible, but to look for accountability, academic growth, and other possibilities. And so based on this, wearing the hat of someone that works with assessment, the questions begin to pop up. The first question is, the two objectives in our repository, can one be more important than the other, and use repositories to assess research? Can it affect that these are repositories seeking to make open science visible? I believe, given this question, the idea is that the tools to which they were created, we also have the use given to them. So to the extent as whether the tool allows you to use it before making open science visible and assess other strategies or aspects. It's not about putting it first, but working with two objectives, and it depends on who's going to look at this information and use it. And it's not only that, but that they understand the limitations of what it's there. We shouldn't think that it's going to be used for assessment with criteria that are not applicable to a repository. So we need to bear this in mind. Who's going to be looking at it and understanding the limitations or the scope of what exists. Another question is, can we assess something more than open access? Because that's the original sense of repositories. And I believe during these days, we've seen this, the possibility of peer review, and then the use of the partnership, not only the social sector, but also a productive sector that can use the documents, not only scholarly articles in our repositories for something else to build and generate. So it's possible that our repositories also allow to assess something beyond open science in issues beyond quality and number, but the quality of the information there. Another question we have is, can we consider repositories even if they don't have 100% of the production? Because we know in our country it's just getting started. We don't have 100% of what we produce. And the answer is there is no tool that has 100% of what our institutions produce. Why not use the repository even if it's just starting? And we start seeing that making use or mentioning different spaces from assessment helped us for its population. It contributed to making it visible, to strengthening the repository and the population, or its population. So we didn't see any limitation here. Now, what else? And these are the questions we would like to put on the table. What can we expect from repositories? In this case, wearing the hat of assessment. In terms of curation, something that I think is essential is that although their protocols and curation for me guarantees the truthfulness of the document being made available, these protocols should also consider the other parts or processes, in this case, research organizations that will use these data or to which data can be useful. An example, when we work jointly with postgraduate systems or academic career to understand the scope of the curation processes they expect from these documents, to integrate them in the curation and review policies to be done in a repository. Also, typologies, the normalization of typologies, and all the reflection of what people are discussing internationally. We need to understand that at an institutional level, concepts are not always the same. And although we can adopt typologies that we think are international, it's not the same for somebody that's assessing and reviewing academic career to refer to a technical report, a scholarly journal, a project report, and all of these definitions need to find an echo on the key actors that participate from the review process and understand what's there and how to make use of this. And of course, this has been mentioned before, which is quality, and conferences have also mentioned peer reviews and preprints. And so the question we have is, we're talking about scientific journals, but repositories have something beyond scholarly articles. How do we guarantee the quality? Can we use them? Can we assess the quality based on of the review of peers that are not scientific articles that are in our repositories, and then extract this information not on the one-to-one, but in the conglomerate of what we have there? And in regards to use, what I mentioned before about how society can take control of this knowledge that is there and manage it for the solution of a conflict or a problem, or even for entrepreneurship. So there are ways that our repositories can assess the use, that we can take the usability data that is there, that are there for society. And this would be the last question for repositories. It has to do with data. Evidently, for quality sake, evidence is key, and evidence or data are key for decision making. So every time decisions want to be made, we need to have data and have the information at hand. Oftentimes, we ask for information in the personal experience of my institution of the same repositories, and this information will not necessarily be the one that we find in the search engine. How much investigation is there in climate change? We see a list of 400K publications, but decision makers are not interested on the list, but on the document that summarizes how many of them are scientific articles, thesis dissertations, what countries are they from, how many come up from a research project. These data, normally, if they're generated, they're asked from the managers of repositories, but it may also be that our repositories have this space so that anyone outside can make use of the information freely and build more information, decision-making specific of the repository without having a third-party intervention. And I believe these are some of the questions we ask ourselves when thinking about using repositories for assessment of research, and in this case, not only thinking about reviews from people, but other entities as projects, community of research. And it seems to me, this is what I have for you, and that this can be discussed today.